Okay, so we're live. So today we're going to talk about recollection of trauma. And I know that we're going to have a conversation about this because some of the things are happening in the news, but I guess go first. And if you want to share your story.
Okay, so recently we were discussing events where we have both experienced a trauma, some form of trauma within our lives. My form of trauma in my life has come perhaps repeatedly after repeatedly after repeatedly. And in dealing with that, your recollection may not always come back as clear. It may be jumbled just due to the trauma. And because of that, when you're telling what happened to you, when you're telling an instance on what happened to you, it may seem far-fetched. It may seem even unbelievable. So in saying that, let me say this. February 28th of last year, I experienced a trauma at my university. It was traumatic for me because of how it happened. A professor came through the hallway while it was packed, while it was busy, yelling, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey, hey, hey. I know I've been discriminating against you. I know I've been making you feel uncomfortable in class. I know this, I know that. I know I'm responsible for your anxiety." So with this being, this professor admitted that she was aware of her treatment of me in class. Yet and still, you pick now in a public area where there's traffic to yell and scream this coming through the hallway. What this did was alert an officer, a campus police officer. This campus officer is a regular police officer just on campus, not your rent-a-cop, nothing like that, a regular police officer that's on campus. Okay. So this officer, who was alerted due to the loud noise in the hallway, stood there and watched as this woman berated me and saw that I was having an anxiety attack, saw the uncomfortable position that I was in, and said and did nothing. Now, after this incident, there were professors that were walking through that had seen what had happened, students as well. After this accident, when I filed an incident report, it was said to be unbelievable. That they couldn't believe that someone would walk through a hallway yelling and screaming like that. It was only until my advisor, who did her own personal digging, not to my benefit, of course, because the woman that did the yelling and the screaming in the hallway was her best friend. She was doing it because she herself could not believe that something like this would have or could have happened. Not to mention during the time that it happened, because it happened February 28th, the last day of Black History Month. My anniversary is coming up this year. Once it was proven that what had happened had truly happened, the professor nor the department chair said anything to me about the incident. What they did do was form their own ring of protection around themselves, because they knew if something like this had got out for their department, what trouble it would be. But even after I let other people know in other departments, it was still believed to be unbelievable, even after there was proof. So
in terms of the recollection of trauma.
When you are going through something traumatic and questions are being asked, people tend to want to know blow by blow, section by section, what happened like this, not knowing that you are already disoriented due to the fact of the incident itself. It's like this. When people often experience trauma and other people have to listen to the trauma, it is often experienced out of order because of how rapid your mind may or may not be going. You may be reliving the most traumatic part of that incident. It does not mean that that incident did not happen or that it's not validated. That would be like saying someone that got raped and went home and cleaned up after themselves, that incident didn't happen because there's no evidence. So this is what we're dealing with and dealing with issues with trauma. We're dealing with not being believed. We're dealing with how people are going about asking information when trauma occurs. And the fact that why a lot of incidents don't get reported about trauma is due to how people react. If they're connected to the person that the trauma happened to, if they're connected to the people accused of that trauma. So you're dealing, I mean, you're coming, in dealing with this, it comes at so many different angles at one time. And you're asking the person to focus.
Okay. So the reason why this is titled Recollection of Trauma is because as you're going through life, okay, and if you experience traumatic things, sometimes you don't always remember how it occurred or exactly how you've been affected by it. I think a lot of times think that trauma, it has like a physical trait to it. And yeah, sure, some traumas are a physical thing that leaves a scar, if you will. But a lot of times trauma that happens to you is a mental trauma, okay? I was sharing an experience with Alex. We had a class together, and I remember we were kind of talking about some of the things that we had experienced just like through life. And we had this class where we were talking about the situation happened with that guy on the airplane.
Right.
And how he was pulled off the plane. And
he wasn't just pulled off the plane. Remember, he was physically assaulted.
Yeah. And then there was like blood everywhere. And I remember watching like this video, right? And I said, I've been black too long. This shit don't look right.
Coin phrased here, ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Dozier.
And the reason I said it that way was because can we just get past the nonsense? You know, let's get to the point of like, that man was traumatized. You know, I don't care. Like physically, you can see that he got abused. You can see there was blood coming out of his mouth. You can see he was being pulled off a plane. But the trauma that stays with him is all mental, really. Unless like physically they did something to him and he became like some kind of disablement happened to him, or somebody broke something and then the pain back of it, and maybe it couldn't be repaired the way it was when it, you know, before he got on the plane. But mainly his trauma is mental. And funny enough, we were talking about how I'm going to be one of the human books in the library and talking about trauma and how I was able to how I negotiate through trauma in my own personal life. But I can't remember everything that happened to me when I was a kid growing up. And I always tell people this story, but it's not like something that I'm afraid of saying. I grew up homeless. I was homeless 3 times in my life. And one of the most traumatic things that happened to me was when I was a kid. I knew something was strange was going on, but I wasn't certain what was happening. I was in the Jordan Down projects with my mom. It was late at night, and I don't know why we were out, but all I remember is that I had witnessed a rape, and my mom was so scared because it was happening like in an alleyway, right where like we walk up into the apartments. And I was a little kid when this happened, but I remember vividly seeing this heinous act happening. And as a kid, I wasn't quite certain what was going on. I knew it wasn't good, obviously, by the sounds and the things that were being said. I could decipher at my young age what that wasn't good. And after that happened, I don't remember exactly how I got in the house, but I remember that my mom was yelling and screaming at me. I had nothing to do with it, but she was so upset that to this day, I can't even remember what I did that day. I can't even remember what happened after that. After I had seen that and my mom somehow got me in the house, I have no idea what happened between that time. I do remember my father telling me one time, like, you know, the way life is, But other than that, I can't remember what happened. But I do remember vividly what happened to that young lady, that young girl. There was another time I was explaining to Alex this. I had witnessed this young girl. Violence against women happens quite often in areas of poverty, period. No, that's besides the point. But again, it happened in the Jordan Down projects. And this young girl was getting brutally beaten by these 5 men. And they actually killed her because she wouldn't back down. She wouldn't quit fighting back. And that stuck with me for a long time. I was traumatized by that, but not in the way of like, some people might view that and say, well, I'm not going to fight back. I'm just going to go ahead and like, give in so I don't have to be, get hurt or worse, die. But it stuck with me because my interpretation of it as a young kid, and even now, was that, oh, wow, she actually, without her probably knowing it, even though she passed away from this horrible act of being brutally beaten, she actually made that guy look small. And all the men that were participating in the event made them look really small. So for me, it was traumatizing because I couldn't believe that no one came to her rescue. I couldn't believe that there was no one there to help her. So in my life, that traumatized me, and I'm always afraid that no one's going to have my back. I'm always worried that I'm going to have to constantly fight for what I need. And I never get people back. Even when people are there for me, I don't 100% believe it, because witnessing stuff like that when you're a kid, and again, it's like groups of men brutalizing women, I'm always like, and it's men from my community. It wasn't men from other communities. It's men from my community. So I see that and I think, I don't hate men from my community. I'm thinking if the protection is supposed to come from men, I never seen it in my life, not in that way. So I've been traumatized into thinking I'm gonna have to constantly protect myself. I was even telling Alex that when I've dated people, I always say the same thing: you can't protect me. And I say you can't protect me because how often are we together? Let's say I'm working, it's 8-9 hours a week, and I'm by myself. Where are you gonna drive to where I'm at? If you're like 2 hours away, you're gonna drive to where I'm at. The thing already happened. It's over. You're gonna be there for emotional support. Is that what's gonna happen here? And not to sound like a jerk, not to sound as though it's a ridiculous thing to say to somebody. The reality is that Black women have to constantly protect themselves because there's not a whole lot of options that we have. So I was traumatized by those events that happened to me as a kid. And there's other traumatic things that have happened to me, but
I will piggyback on what you said though. But as women of color, we are always on the defense. Mm-hmm. And it just goes back to what you said. We don't feel protected, not even amongst our own men, not even amongst our own community. Mm-hmm. And because we're constantly either battling verbally, mm-hmm. physically, mm-hmm. mentally, or emotionally, whether it's for some level of playing ground. Yeah. So that we can move, or so that we can do this, so we can do that. We often end up being seen as combative, something to tame, or something to even go so far as to break down and then make into something more usable. I use quotes usable because we as women, we're very much so not usable, but we're very much so of use. And what it is that I don't fit the use that you want for me. And so because I don't fit that, why go through what I have to go through to build another one from scratch when I can just break you down? And it's just really what it is. And when somebody goes to try to make an example of you, and as being people of color, we're often used as making people being used to be made as an example, someone to be put in the forefront and being like broken down, either broken down, especially like publicly.
But in terms of trauma,
I'm
just saying,
yeah.
when I'm recalling trauma, I'm always thinking about, I think when people want you to recall everything that happened, I think that some people have a fantastic recollection. I think they have a fantastic way of giving information out. They know exactly what happened, but that's not the same thing for everybody. Not everybody is going to remember every detail, every single step that took place of them. I mean, they can do their best and can try, and there's certain events that you actually block out. I mean,
it does, and it does that.
If someone asks me, okay, can you give me details of what every single thing those people were wearing the day that you saw it, I can tell you every single piece of garment those men were wearing when they beat that girl to death. But I cannot tell you every piece of clothing that was on the men that were abusing that young lady in the alleyway.
No, and it's interesting how the mind works to protect itself. Like I'm studying psychology, and so with that, you deal with a lot of trauma and a lot of recollection after trauma. The mind is a very interesting thing, which is why they believe the mind and the brain are separate. Even though they coexist, they believe they coexist within the same spot. It's different because the mind will do whatever it has to do to protect itself, even if it means protecting itself from you and keeping you from having some form of breakdown because you need to function at some type of level.
Remember, we were having a conversation, and then I can't remember exactly what was going on, but we were having a conversation, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's a detail of my life that
you haven't talked about, or you couldn't remember."
I couldn't remember,
and then something happened to trigger it when it's old,
and then immediately I'm like, "Oh yeah,"
because now you've matured enough, and as far as your mental growth, to be able to handle that certain aspect, which is interesting. The mind, it almost acts as though it's a funnel, and it will funnel in certain information at certain times. It's almost like certain things will act as a trigger to unlock a key. And it'll say, okay, now it's okay to open this door. When I was watching this movie, I can't think of it, but you know what it was. Independent film, Black, a young gay man, Boys in the Blue, no, Moonlight. That's what it was. Sorry. I was had to think Boys in the Blue because I was thinking about the colors on the cover. So when I was thinking about Moonlight, there was an incident that had happened in that movie. And it reminded me of something that had happened to me in my childhood. Now, I can only remember, it was that movie Moonlight. It wasn't that movie Moonlight. It was something about the Johnsons. If y'all haven't had a chance to look at this movie is
that an independent one that's on YouTube?
Yes, it's been on YouTube about the father and the son, the trauma.
So the story pretty much is that the son was abusing the father. Okay,
both physically and sexually.
Physical.
Well, yeah.
Yes, it was sexual violence against his father. It's a story that has been out for a while on YouTube. I remember watching this back, I think probably in 2000,
right when
14, maybe I want to say. But they did a really fantastic job with. I mean, as an independent film, they did a really good job. It's a weird story because you never see it in that light, that it's a father being sexually abused by the son.
And it's a Black family.
Yeah, and it's a Black family.
So in dealing with that, you're also again dealing with trauma in different forms and in different perspectives. I brought that up.
But why did you bring up Moonlight?
Right. The reason why I brought up Moonlight is because I had watched Moonlight before that, and then I was like, it was something that day. But both of these movies are both dealing with a form of trauma, whether it's coming from.
Yeah, but we're talking about the recollection of trauma.
I got what we were talking about. Okay. So as I was pointing out the movie, it jogged something in my head about a trauma that had happened to me between me and my mother. And I can only remember even up to this day to a certain part, like a door of a door closing and me and my mother behind this door. And it just fades out no matter how hard or how much I tried to bring up that memory. I know I got my ass whooped. That much I do remember, but I don't. There's a portion of it that happened in between that I cannot recollect. Like no matter what, and it's been, woof, almost like give or take like 15 years. And I still can't.
Well, that's also
remember.
what they have. Like, you have doctors that specialize in this to help you kind of work through your traumas and, find out what you're suppressing to the best of their ability, to figure out what you're suppressing and how to help you cope through it. Traumatic experiences. I mean, I have a lot of different ways for coping with trauma just because I've had so much of it happen in my life. Then again, when you're Black, I mean, I hate to put it that way, but when you're Black in poverty, I'm just going to flat out say that you grew up in poverty and you're Black, you experience a lot of different traumas. And one of the things that you experience in terms of trauma that people don't talk about is like mental illness and dealing with somebody in your family who has mental illness and you don't have the ability or the means and ways to give them that help they deserve, the help they need. It's traumatic for the people involved with somebody who has a mental illness or a mental disability or a physical disability. It definitely makes life
difficult.
In poverty, it makes it even more difficult. And sometimes people in poverty don't know. They can identify that people who have those particular disablements are, and I hate to put it this way, different. That because they have a disability, but they don't always know how. And I say they, meaning just people in poverty, don't always know how to maneuver or to coexist in that space. I mean, when people are in poverty, you learn how to coexist with each other. It's not always pretty. It's not always the most pleasant. And sometimes you can cause trauma to other people, and trauma can happen to you because you don't have you don't know all the language. You can't always articulate. You don't always know the right ways to go to help yourself or other people. I remember a time
receiving the help yourself.
Right. I remember a time that in my own life, there was someone that in my family who had mental health issues, and we didn't have the ability to get them the help they needed. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the funds, we didn't have access like everybody else that who had more money had. And that caused a lot of issues because the little bit of help that you get from free clinics was. I remember one of the things they were telling us, like one time this happened to this person that was in my family. And out of respect, I'm not going to say the person's name, but they were held at the this mental institute, this mental place. I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, but it was out here, and they were only held because the cops were like forced to hold them. Opposed to you taking yourself to this place, I think you can walk in and out as you please. But if you're taken there, if the police come and take you and bring you there, then there's like a psychiatric hold for like 3 days or something like that.
Sorry, folks, I'm not laughing at the situation. That's not what it is. It's just like when the police take you there, you might not leave.
Yeah,
it's
but this particular place, it was. You get like a 72-hour hold or something. And that doesn't help you like be better. I mean, the idea is that they hold you so that you can be monitored. And I guess they can help you with like regulating your medicine. But at the same time, it's really not that simple. It sounds simple to say, take this person here or take this person here. But it's very complicated and it requires a lot more work than people make it seem. And a lot of times people in poverty don't know how to negotiate that because sometimes they can't. Sometimes they spend all their time working just to survive. And then on top of that, you're dealing with, these other things. But that's trauma that can cause you to have like a mental breakdown dealing with that in itself. And it's unfortunate because people like to make it seem like we have access to all these things. And sure, you have access. Sure, the stuff is there. Sure, you can go there and get.
But it does no good if somebody's not telling you or showing you how to get access to that.
True, but in terms of the recollection of trauma, I want to stay on track because we kind of went off track for a second. But it isn't the same, and for some people it is, but it isn't the same when you're talking about it. Sometimes with other people, you're more comfortable with sharing certain parts of your trauma.
Mm-hmm.
With other people, you're not comfortable with sharing the particular trauma. With other people, you're like, I'm going to just tell the whole thing. And it's, I know there's no judgment there.
I think another thing people forget, though, is also the recollection of the trauma. It's like opening the womb all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people get away from that. Well, why don't you tell your story to this person? Or why don't you tell the story to that person? Or why did you wait now to tell your story? And it's not so much as it being put on a time schedule. Well, we want to know now. We want to know now. Of course you do. However, the individual that has to tell this story has to relive it. And oftentimes it doesn't just come so much as a memory, but more so like a flashback. So as they're describing it, they're actually physically feeling it, mentally smelling it, and just different things like that. And it's them reliving it all over again. Coming from someone myself that deals with their own mental health issues. Yes, I'm saying it because it's true. It's something that goes on within the Black community that we often don't feel comfortable enough to talk about nor discuss. But it's important that we do seek the help that we can to talk about these traumas, so that we don't perpetuate it, because it's often things like other cultures and other races, they're afforded this ability to be able to say, oh yeah, I've had this trauma, I have this trauma, but the minute you slap a race or a color on something, oh, that trauma doesn't apply to you. And henceforth it causes us to shy away from help that is there. And in doing so, we fall into that, well, nobody believed me, which is why I don't like to reflect on that, or we have this cavalier attitude. Yeah, it happened to me, and I know I'm not the only one it happened to. It happened to my mother, or a generational thing. And this is something
I think that's really what we should really be delving into in terms of like trauma and the recall of the trauma, because that whole people don't believe you thing.
Yeah.
And then like now you gotta have evidence to support, because like I get you like having evidence, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying evidence is invalid, I'm saying that,
but it's something you said about the evidence. Why is the evidence always the victim's job?
I did say that. So why is the burden of the evidence always on the victim? Like
and then they're dealing with trauma, and this is another issue.
They are, but I guess
you have to be the victim. It's like you're forced now into all these different roles. You have to be forced into the role of a defense attorney. Then you have to be forced into the role of a prosecution.
Well,
then you have to be
and I would say this though. People who have not experienced trauma, or people who have experienced trauma, both people will say, well, I was able to recall everything that happened. Yeah, because you're not me.
Right.
You're not me. You can't tell me what I remember, I don't remember, or how my story doesn't sound correct
or
to you.
What I felt.
What does your story have to do with my story? Just because you went out and did that doesn't mean that that's my first thought. Like, I know we brought up rape before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring it up again just to kind of solidify the point. How many stories have we heard about people being sexually abused? Not just women, but sexually assaulted, and then they're not believed.
Yes, men were talking about you.
Because, they didn't go get a rape kit after the rape happened. I'm sorry if you've never been raped. It's so insulting that it kind of makes you just want to just
It's
not have a conversation.
It's re-victimizing the victim, but just in a different form.
The word rape now, it sounds like the word equality, meaning that there's like, you said it, you say it so much, it sounds like it doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something. And rape is not this like thing that they show on movies where it's like, oh, it's a stylistic view of what rape looks like. No, rape is awful. Rape is, I personally, I don't even like having conversations about it, just because I find that people are way too cutesy about talking about what rape is. It's like with slavery with Black people. They're like, oh, Black people were just slaves. No, we weren't just slaves. We were experimented on. It's a whole genocide against Black people. Okay, we were cut up. We were lit on fire. A whole bunch of terrible stuff happened to us. They found inventive ways to do horrible stuff to Black people. Okay, it wasn't just slavery. Okay, so when people talk about rape and the trauma that rape has, you don't understand what that's like.
No.
Have you ever had a friend who was abused like that? That you can't say anything. Even if you had a friend who was abused like that, you have no idea what that person's going through mentally, about like what kind of trauma they're going to have for the rest of their lives because of that.
Right. I mean, I have friends that have been sexually assaulted, and
you feel
like people that they trust, and you're just like,
well, usually statistically it is somebody you know.
I'm just like,
I know for me that I know
I want to just roll up on them.
I'm gonna just be honest with you, I would lose my mind.
Like, I want to lose my mind every time, and they're like, no, out of respect for me. Got it. But I'm just saying
trauma is always interesting because people always have these weird thoughts about trauma, like
on how you should act or what the proper
or how long it's supposed to stay with you, or
it's just like post-traumatic stress syndrome. What
are you my therapist? Is the question. Are you gonna pay for my therapy?
Right.
Or are you going to judge me? Are you going to pay for my therapy, or are you going to judge me? And even if you are paying for my therapy, it still takes that person time to get to that point of even wanting help, because there's this whole process that you go through. And some people have healthier coping mechanisms. For me, I never went the route of medication. I've always thought of like, I don't want to be an addict. I don't want to be codependent on something. I want to be able to get through what I'm going through in a positive way. And I view things like, the positive thing would be like me working out, me reading, me getting more educated, me doing something against these horrible things that have happened, fighting against poverty, fighting against capitalism, trying to get equal rights for everybody. That's the kind of things that I fight for, because I didn't have that when I was a kid. And all I ever had was, I would read a lot. And wasn't in school because my mom like hammered that into us. But
for those of us that are medicated, I say
that's different though. That's since you're sharing your personal experience, that's different. When I'm talking about self-medication, I'm talking about people going out and like getting wasted because they feel like that's the only way they can suppress themselves. In terms of like drinking, if someone, they're smoking, if they're doing some other drugs, I view that as like an unhealthy coping mechanism, because it leads to a downslide. It leads into worse territory, and you have to work 10 times harder to pick yourself up from that point than the point that you were at before. Even though I will say this again, that trauma might have put you at that lowest. And maybe you don't feel like there's another way, but that's why you have to talk to specialists. That's why you have to talk to people and get this stuff out. I prefer to talk. I prefer to go and talk to a specialist. I prefer, if I can. If you can't, talk to the people that aren't toxic around you. If you haven't, they have free lines that you can call and talk to people any time of the day, as long as you want. I find that some of the best coping for me going through the stuff I was going through was just being able to talk about it. Just to talk it off my chest. It's no longer nagging at me because I want to yell and scream. And I can actually yell and scream with somebody, and they share their experiences, and you exchange, you start realizing that life's terrible. Life's terrible, but you keep going on. You keep fighting, and then you can put positive energy into the negative thing that happened to you. Now, I'm not saying that this is the solution that is for everybody. I'm just saying that there's different steps, there's different pathways. I took that pathway. Some people go all the way to the deep end, and they submerge, and they come back up, and they're like 10 times like amazing, the most amazing people you'll ever meet. Some people never recover. I mean, it really just depends on what resources you can that are actually attainable. And I don't mean just access. I mean you can actually do it, and it's not going to be a huge burden on you to actually do it. I mean, there's some burden involved with therapy. There's some burden involved with getting help.
Yeah, you have to do it. I mean,
there's burden. There's burden
you're gonna
involved
find it
because the trauma is a burden. So there's burden involved with getting rid of it too. It takes more time. It takes work, but whatever.
It just depends, like, where you want to go with it. If you want to, if it's something that's hindering you, if it's something that you want to keep carrying around with you, like even like I was saying myself, for those of us that are medicated, what I mean is not self-medicated, but that have gone through like therapy, and you have a psychiatrist or a psychologist, there is there is that help. And no, you don't have to be a slave or worry about becoming an addict. You can set your own spectrums on the things that you take and do your own research, as well as ask other multiple questions. And I think that's something that's very important. And that's just because it is things that don't get addressed in our community and things like that. But yeah, the after effects of trauma is something that needs to be dealt with. And don't be so quick to pass judgment on people because they're not recollecting things, or they're not speaking to your level of speaking, or recalling things to your shape, your fashion. You have to it would behoove you to be patient, because you never know what can happen once things finish unfolding, when the truth really does come out. And the truth be told, nobody actually really knows the truth except for the person that's been through that trauma and the others that may have been involved in that. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in your journey of going through talking about your trauma, what were some of the things that you found helpful? Because I explained some of the things I found helpful.
For me, a lot of things coping through my trauma. I grew up in an abusive household. My art was something that I turned to. I was very good at drawing. It was a stress relief for me. It was pointed out earlier on in age that I had a temper, like I was living two lives. So at school, I was more like, I didn't like bullies. And so I would pick on the bullies. So I would catch a bully picking on somebody, and I would just be whooping ass. Shouldn't have been whooping ass. I was whooping ass on sight. Like, I had scars on my face growing up. I had a lot of scars on my face. And so I get called Scarface. And I'm not going to talk to you about it. We're not going to negotiate. I'm going to walk up. Hi, how are you? Hey, Alex, how you doing? Bink, 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 bink. I'm doing great. So, you can't go around beating up on people. So
no.
Drawing was my thing. Yeah, for kids. So, like I was saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You're right. I don't have nothing to say. But reading, I found like a love for history, and some place that took me somewhere other than where I was. And extracurricular activities was cool. Like I never could play sports unless it was during PE. So that was cool too. And music. Music was a big outlet for me. It still is a big outlet for me. It helps with my creative process. And I would have to say understanding. Reading about some of the things that are out there as far as certain like disorders and different things, and recognizing them in the people that may have surrounded you or raised you. And in me studying psychology, which I was initially doing to save on a bill, and found out that I actually had a love for it and a need for it because it helped me understand certain things that I had gone through in my life, and saw that there was a need,
Right.
not just in my life but in the community, to talk about these things, to talk about these issues and these traumas. And it feels good when you know that you're not the only one that's experienced that or gone through that. We've shared, like, somewhat similar stories of different upbringings and different things like that. So that also helps.
I did want to touch on what you said earlier about like how people don't believe people who've gone through trauma. Like sometimes they think like, nah, I don't believe that.
Right.
All my life,
I had to fight.
But
I love hot oh God.
those I do.
I'll kill him dead if I ever let him beat me. We love you, Oprah.
I don't. But no, but in all seriousness, there's several reasons why people do not believe the trauma that I've been through. One of the reasons is because how I talk. There is a perception of people who sound the way I sound, and they think there's no way you grew up that way. Don't be stupid. I'm just going to flat out say that's what do my actions say? Okay.
Don't fuck with her.
Because we're all she couldn't go without cursing. Okay. It always blows my mind when people would make assumptions about me. And it was based off how I sound and how I look, which is really strange to me because I got no passes when I was growing up. I'm going to tell you something. You don't know how low is until you're a child homeless. And you can see people for what they really are. That's why I don't spend a lot of time going to long stories about stuff. You need what you want. I learned something by working at a university that people want to talk to you a lot. They want to like get information out of you. And I'm saying, yes, that's fine, but what do you want? I don't have time for the fluff, just because I just don't have enough time, period. And I learned when I was growing up and being homeless 3 times in my life, which I always tell people it can happen again. It can happen again. I don't come from wealth. I don't come from wealth. Everybody that I know is in poverty, regardless if they want to believe they're in poverty or not. That has nothing to do with me. Just look at your life. Tell me you lose your job tomorrow, you won't be homeless tomorrow. Okay. I have no wealth that is in my name. Do I have, companies that I work for and I own? Yeah. But it's not like it's all based on how I'm managing it. It's based on how the people that I hire and how they are functioning and the ability to make money. But it again, it's not like I can't be in poverty again. I was already, and I'm only 31 years old. And I've been homeless 3 times in my life. One of the times I was homeless, I was in Chicago in school during wintertime. Excuse my language, but during wintertime. I don't know, it's like to be homeless during the wintertime.
In Chicago, they don't call it the Windy City for nothing.
And it's an illusion that there's all these places people can go to, like homeless shelters. That's not how this works. There's not just big warehouses where everybody can just sleep.
That's Trauma Central alone. For those of
trying
you
to sleep in a homeless shelter is
Challenging ain't the
For a
word.
moment, you feel relieved because you have a roof over your head. For a moment, you feel relief.
Notice she said a moment.
And then you start seeing kids. I'm going to tell you right now. I started seeing kids and I thought, yeah, that was me when I was about that age. And I'm back here again. Because I had nobody I could go to. Like, there was somebody who came to my office and asked me, oh, don't you have like doctors in your family? What the hell does that have to do with me?
Okay.
I was just like, those people aren't helping me out. You know, so that's traumatic for me when
you know that there's
talk
help
about trauma,
and
talk
nobody
about trauma, talk about how the fact that you have family, right?
Oh yeah.
And your family that, you know, has a name, okay, or they were able to, you know, get wealth in some kind of form, looks at you and says, yeah, you're my brother's kid, but my brother is a black sheep, and because you're the offspring of a black sheep, we're not going to help you.
You're
don't
black
exist.
too. You're
You
the
don't
black.
exist.
You're the black sheep. You're a black sheep too.
Jokingly, I always tell people, I'm like, I might have family out there, but I'll never know because we were discarded from the rest of our family. Not because we did anything bad to anybody. Not because we were horrible people. Quite the contrary. It's just because people will do for themselves, and that's traumatic to say to people, I have no idea what my cousins are up to.
I'm the child of a black
idea.
sheep, so I know what she's saying is true. I recently had to bury my mom, and I have cousins back east that have money, have businesses, and this is based off of the work that my grandmother did. She would send money back home. So when it came time for me to bury my mom, oh, you know, this, that, and the other. No, I just didn't call these people on a whim. These are people that have known me, and I have known them. So just different things like that. And then you get them, oh, so you're calling me for money. You know what? I don't even want your dollars.
No, but I mean, that's part of trauma. That's part of saying, you know, you're going through.
And then they want to pass the buck. Oh, isn't such and such there to help you? Such and such ain't my blood. You are.
When you get older and time heals all wounds.
Or you getting ready to die.
I say time heals all wounds, and
are you getting ready to die?
You start thinking about the trauma. You start thinking about the people that are in your life, and you start thinking like, was it really that bad? Was it really that bad? And you contact those people again, you're like, nah, no, sure was that bad.
Yeah.
I don't know why my mind went to positive things.
Yeah.
I actually read a book about that, about how your mind will start going to very positive things after a while. Like you start
happy place.
You start to think, oh, it wasn't as bad as it was. No, it was that bad. You just are trying to
cope with it.
Yeah, you're trying to cope with it. And I always tell people, forgiveness is interesting because one, I don't believe in it. The reason I don't believe in forgiveness is because forgiveness is associated with the divinity. Like it's divine. And I don't believe, I'm not religious. So since it's associated with divinity, which means that you have to be close to godliness, right? To have the ability to forgive somebody who said something awful to you. I always tell people that not only do I not believe in forgiveness, I think it has more to do with you stacking up your chips, meaning that you are taking, this balancing thing that you're doing when something bad happens, you're putting more weight on the scale of something good happening to you. And you're trying to add on that scale because you're feeling like this, right? All the bad things are like way up here, right? And to balance it out or make your life more positive, you put more happy, better, positive things to balance out the scale, get an equilibrium, or to just be happy. You don't forget those things that happen to you. You're not forgiving those people. You're just simply saying there's more important things that need to happen for me, positive things for me to go through my life and cope with this in a positive way than to keep thinking about this thing and saying, I forgive you.
So what I do is
really,
I clown you. I'm a clown you. When I retell this story.
But that's my unprofessional opinion about forgiveness, opposed to you just
I'm a dog walk
stacking the chips and and the scale of you having more positivity in your life opposed to those negative things.
My positive thing is I'm going to clown you. The next time I tell this story, you may have a nickname. You may look like an animal. You may be a dog in a dress.
Mhm.
You may be all kind of things. Not human either.
Again, I think,
but different
that
coping
is-
mechanisms, different strokes for different
everybody has
folks.
different coping
I'm
mechanisms.
going to clown you. You heard it here, real live.
Mhm.
Alex T, that's me. I'm going to clown you. I do.
Mhm.
And I'm going to hurt your feelings. Whether you know it, you don't know it, I'm going to make sure you know it.
You know, even with this whole idea of like thinking about trauma and how, you remember it
And remember,
coping, I'm pretty sure, and I don't want to say this as though I'm an expert in it. We're just talking about this. I think that you can also remember it as being worse than what it was, because your feelings about it are heavy.
They are heavy.
Like
every
and the
time
way you feel about it can definitely alter what actually took place.
It does.
And
then here's the thing. Here's the defining point is when there were other people there present. When that incident happened to me in DDH hallway, I thought I was going to get shot and tased by that officer just because that officer kept filling with their gun belt. Now, for me, it was like, did I really see?
Mhm.
Because the first thing I'm going to say when I'm telling people this, nah, come on, that might not be. But when a person on looking with three or four other individuals with them say, nah, this person was looking like, nah, their hands was too much.
My back.
She gonna send me to weightlifting in the middle of this.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
She was testing this. Okay, it's my right arm. It's my strong arm.
Oh,
but when it's happened, it caused me.
I need some chapstick because my stuff is dry.
To question myself. But when I'm asking other people, no, that was very questionable. That officer's actions was very questionable, and that they were comfortable enough to do this in a public setting.
Mm-hmm.
That is what makes it traumatic. That is what makes it dangerous, is that other people were looking and listening and nobody stepped in and be like, hey, calm down. Nothing like that. They let it happen as though they wanted to see it happen. And then when they were asked, did this happen? You get people that say yay and people that say, well, I was present, but I wasn't paying attention. So it makes you, again, well, along with your own psyche. And this is where you have to do it, because
breaks down your psyche, because now you're like, wait a minute.
Right.
Did I really experience what I thought I experienced?
Did I really experience what I thought I experienced? Did somebody really see what I thought I said? And oftentimes I was told, well, you pulled the fire alarm too quick, or I don't know, maybe you moved too quick. No, I didn't move quick enough. And that was my problem. My problem was I was so overtaken by fear. I sat there and let myself be berated by an individual while I'm watching another individual who sees what's going on and not like, hey, maybe we should take this outside.
And again, I think it's interesting that people do not understand the complex relationship that Black people have with police. We're not going to react the same way like a white counterpart is going to react to the police, just because we just know, like, we've had too many experiences. We have friends and cousins and relatives, like we have people in our families.
This is happening on a university setting.
But it's not just happening at this university.
Oh, no.
It's happened at other universities. It's happened at other places. We've had too many conversations. There's too many stories that have happened when Black students or Black people on campus, I'll be quite honest with you, there's an incident that happened to me where there was a professor there with two other Black people that were students, and got rolled up on by the police because we were quote unquote loud in the parking lot. I asked the guy, I said, is there a noise like thing that we violated? He's like, no, it wasn't. I was like, so why are y'all here? Like, we're walking to the car, we're having a conversation.
The issue was that they didn't believe you guys after you guys had identified.
Well, not you guys. I identified us. I'm the one who identified us. The other person was yelling and screaming and acting out, and that's what happened.
Should have been taken, to be honest.
Anyway, so and that's fine. Yell and scream and be upset, but it's gonna do nothing but cause more problems. But that was traumatic for me. But I just handle trauma just a little differently than everybody else does. If I was younger and that happened to me, I probably would be scared to death to walk around. I think more like, okay, since you did that, now I'm really going to be in your face. Every chance you see me, I'm going to come up to you and talk to you. And I'm going to make it a point so that you know who I am and people that are associated with me, so that you don't have this lying narrative that you have no idea who these people are, right? So for me, in terms of trauma, I always find it interesting when other people want to tell you that your trauma is valid, or no, your trauma is not valid, or that's not how that happened.
Who are
This
you
is
to
actually how it
valid?
happened.
Who are you to validate somebody?
That
else's
doesn't make
trauma?
any sense,
You
because
can't do that.
this and this, all of a sudden people are like master detectives. It's like, where all these people that working for the FBI all of a sudden come from?
Okay, because it took y'all too long to find Bin Laden. Ask me. Like,
What are you talking about?
What I mean is, when you say where are these people with all these investigations, like if y'all was really good at your job, y'all would have found enemies of the state or enemies of this, or the people that are really
no. When
threats.
I'm talking about, I don't know where you went with this. Like,
Went left field.
You did.
I went left.
What I'm talking about is when people who don't have any professional, like, you have no types of degrees or
That's
experience.
because Dr. Phil's ruined it for everybody. No type of experience, but being judgment based off of certain stories being heard. No, real talk. Think about it.
First of all, stop saying things on here that you cannot verify. Until you can verify these things, I'm going to go ahead and say it's alleged. Don't say those things.
Fine. Allegedly.
Is it true or is it not true? You don't know. Okay, so I'm just saying, you're saying things and that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about something very specific. We're talking about something very specific. But in terms of like the trauma, again, there's people who want to diagnose. They want to say, oh, your story's true. Your story's true. That's not trauma. This is this. How can you say that? You have no type of experience in this field. You're just somebody listening to someone's story. Instead of just being a listener, you want to tell them that their story is not correct. Or I don't believe you because this and this isn't add up. What detective agency did you go to?
Everybody watches too much Criminal Minds and they think they too are a profiler. I guess that's what I was getting with the whole Dr. Phil thing. But yes, people want to profile you. If you don't fit into some type of category of what is considered acceptable trauma, or acceptable this or acceptable that, oh, it must not have happened,
right? Because
it doesn't fit in the spectrum of what I've read about it. And frankly, you have to stuff
like you've read all the medical journals,
right? All the medical journals, like you've read all of this and all of that. When we know a lot of this stuff hasn't been up to date in quite some time,
but
it stays evolving. It stays evolving.
That's why they have continuing education. This is why doctors have continuing education. This is why people in the medical field have continuing education, because things are always changing, or there's different ways, methods to do stuff. Especially all the different types of medication. I mean, like, I'm just saying that I find it interesting that people want to talk about trauma as though they have the keys.
Oh, they don't.
There's different methods of therapy for a reason, because there's not a cookie cutter like method for everybody.
And they're trying to put one. Trust me, if that was the case, what the DSM book wouldn't be that fat with different types of syndromes and different type of medication and stuff, dealing with mental health issues or people dealing with angst or anxiety, and just different things like that. That's often caused by trauma. And don't just think that you can get all your answers from one person. I'm a believer of talking to multiple therapists and multiple people so you can get it out, because one therapist may be geared towards this versus another therapist geared towards that. So,
but again, that's why I'm saying there's no cookie cutter way to solve something. And again, like you say, like having multiple therapists, because again, people specialize in certain things, like people specialize in this. And maybe their delivery is better. Maybe it's from a body that you can, like, whether it be a man or a woman or a transperson
Maybe
or a
one
non-gender
person-
conforming person.
Maybe
You
one
know?
person's good with trauma and the other person is good with moving you forward. Maybe another person is good with other habits and different things like that. All I'm
Yes.
saying is the only way you're gonna be able to do that is if by talking about it and talking about it with somebody that's automatically not gonna be like, oh, that's not true or that couldn't happen. You need somebody that's able to listen, not so much with a sympathetic or empathetic ear, but just listen, period, to be able to hear you out, to be able to help you develop the tools that you need to work through it. And that is very much so important, because the last thing you want is for you not to ever address or deal with the trauma that has happened to you. And I think as people, and especially people of color, that's what we fall into. We often fall into making excuses for ourselves. Oh no, this can't happen to me when we're Black. You know, we go through this our entire lives, and this, that, and the other. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it okay. But it does make it very unhealthy.
Right.
It makes it unhealthy, and it can cause hindrance in you in your personal life, in your professional life, your school life, your everyday life, your functionality. You'll learn stuff about you, and it weighs down on your health, not just your mental health, but your physical health and just different things like that. Because we find other ways and other means to cope. And with that being said, anything else you want to add?
I think that recalling or the recollection of trauma, that takes specialists to help. And if you're telling people about your trauma, please understand that a lot of times you're talking to people who aren't educated in the field. They haven't read about it. They don't understand it. They're only going off of some of the things that maybe they heard from a friend, or maybe their cousin's friend was like in the medical field. They'll give you a little bit of information. I've given people a pass for saying things that weren't pleasant about my traumas, because I quickly realized that your understanding of trauma and the recollection of it is very, very small. It's very naive. Okay. And if you want someone to hear you out, you just want to talk to somebody. Again, I always say there's professional lines that you can go to. They're free, and you can talk about your trauma. If you have no one that you can talk to about it, if you have a friend that you can talk to about anything and not going to judge you, talk to your friend who's not going to judge you. Because what you really need, if you can't remember stuff, is to go to a trained specialist. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm saying that because that's the only way you're going to get down to the bottom of why you're repressing certain things about what happened. Okay. Some other people,
not to say your friends aren't enough, but they may not be enough.
they can help you. I'm not saying they can help you, but you also have to understand that your friends probably aren't trained professionals.
And there are tools that you can get from trained professionals that your friends can't give you. Your friends are always going to be your friends, because they didn't stuck with you through the madness and
having somebody as support system is always a good thing.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. We're not dissing the friends, trust me, because the two I got, I value.
Right.
Because it takes a special individual to deal with all this.
Is that right?
That's right. But yeah, no. But what she was saying was very much true and very much valid. Trained professionals. I've had friends come to me and ask me questions, and I was like, listen, I know from the things that you're saying to me, I'm not enough, and I can't give you what you need. I'm always going to be here for you. That will never change. But what you need is, you really do need somebody, a licensed, trained somebody. I'm not licensed.
But it also can help. Trained. It also can help your friendships too, because if you think about this, if you're looking, like, maybe you have a really smart friend, I don't know, and usually your friends write about stuff. You
try
go
to surround
to them,
myself with those.
Yeah, you go to them for like advice. The problem is that if they're wrong, you're going to hold it against them, and that's not fair, because they're not, again, a trained professional in this feel. You just,
here's the thing.
again, if
You've
you have
already made
the
up your
ability-
mind and you setting your friend up for an okie doke. You've already made up your
not
mind.
really, not really.
You don't think so?
Not really. I don't think so. I don't think that that's something that, I think sometimes when you're looking for relief from the pressure of a terrible situation that happened to you, I think that you don't mean to respond in a negative way. I think that it's just part of the trauma. Talking about it can cause you to lash out on the people that want to hear you. That's why therapists are there, if you can afford a therapist. That's why I'm saying, if you can't afford a therapist, they do have, you can go to free clinics that you can talk to people. There's lines that you can talk to people. They can direct you to somebody. There's ways that you can do it, and there should be no shame or stigma when you're a black person. I'll say this, for me, it was just not having the access, not knowing that there was stuff out there that you can go to, because it's not like there's billboards around that say this is a free place you can go
when having a mental breakdown,
when having a mental breakdown, or you went through something
come
traumatic.
here.
And there was something traumatic. There's no billboards around there, but you sure will see. You'll sure see in black neighborhoods billboards for the next liquor shop that came up,
in the plasma places,
or the bail bonds people. But you won't see stuff for like mental health or anything like that. You sure won't hear nothing about that.
And we know what that's due to, because they don't want to perpetuate. Oh, there really is an issue within the community. Oh no, they're just being them, or they're just saying something just to get something.
There's a lot of mental health and trauma issues in poor communities because of the fact they are in poverty.
Mm-hmm. And it
goes like hand in hand. It goes hand in hand.
It's PB&J. It really is.
Pretty much, it's hand in hand. These things kind of work in tandem because of the fact that the nature of not having the ability to have things and not being able to
afford things.
Yeah,
and
they go together. So
assess things, because just think about it. In your average community, your average community in poverty, you look at the emergency cares that's given, and that alone sets the stage for the things that are going on within our community, things that are happening, and just different things like that. So, I mean, it's not a figment of our imagination. It is something that is alive and thriving within these communities that are in poverty. So don't think that, this may not be happening to you or may not be happening where you are. It is. You just have to have your eyes open to it.
Okay. So what do you want to finish up in terms of trauma? Because I have more to share, but I will be at the Walter Stern Library. I'm going to be a human book.
I read it.
I'll be a human book, and I'm talking about life after trauma, and I go into more detail than on here because again, I go into more detail about the traumas that happened to me in my life and how I deal with the traumas that I've experienced and all types of different traumas that I've been through, and how I deal with it.
Right, and I also think that also too, like in doing this, it sets not so much the
By
stage,
the way,
but the bar.
this is because students had asked me to do it.
By the way, I love it how she just cuts my leg
off.
I'm sorry.
Like, I'm just saying because I didn't want to do it because I thought I wasn't interesting.
Yeah, she was asked several times.
Students were like, Kelly, you should do this human library thing. I'm like, girl.
Students both in magic and just students that come to her office. Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it? I'm asking, so you gonna do it? Why do you keep asking me? I was like, geez, this is my first time. I just heard about it. But she's like, no, it's not just you, it's other students too. But I guess what I want to leave with was don't take trauma so lightly. And there is help if you need it. And don't be so quick to pass judgment. Don't be so quick to pass judgment on somebody, especially when you know you weren't there. And everybody's like, opinion and perspective. Well, all perspective is somebody's personal opinion. Don't forget that. So, yeah. And stop by the human library. I won't be there. She will, though. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's it, really. Leave comments and tell us what you think about your experiences. If you want to share it with recalling the trauma that's happened to you and how people have responded to your recollection of your trauma. If people were open to you, if people questioned you and like didn't believe it, at least a comment. And we'll love to do like a part 2 of this and have more people come in and talk about what trauma they could remember or how people responded to it.
Or even how this segment affected them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Peace.
Bam.